Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. Hey, we are glad that you're joining with us. This is episode number 132. And
132. Don't interrupt me, Greg.
I am going to interrupt
132.
You want to make these intros faster. Anyway, we're just glad you guys are with us. And if you're new to the podcast, we want to welcome you. My name is Greg Harris. I am the senior pastor here at a church called Olive Branch Community Church. I might be your senior pastor if you're checking it out for the first time. We're just glad you're jumping in. And this is a podcast where we chase the rabbits that are released at the sermon, and we just start going wherever the topic of the sermon goes. In other words, we're going to chase the truth wherever it runs. That's our idea, and that's what we're hoping to do. And we hope that you'll join with us as we run around after them rascally wabbits. But say hi to my fellow rabbit chasers, guys. Say hi to everybody out there.
Hello, everybody. My name is Stephan Oldham. I'm the local outreach pastor here at Olive Branch. And we love the fact that you guys are listening or are watching us on YouTube. If you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe and tell your friends and give us a thumbs up. But the most important thing you can do is share it. If you're watching on Spotify or Apple, give us a star and follow us there. But let us know where you're following us, whether you're listening to us on your run or your walk or with your family. And and if you want to make a comment, how would they do that?
Well, I'm Brent Branchett. I'm the Connections Pastor here at Olive Branch Church. And if you have any questions, it doesn't have to be topic related. If you have any theological questions or life questions, feel free to let us know. And you can email us at rabbittrail@obcc.church, rabbittrail@obcc.church. And we would love to take some time to discuss those questions. So
you were doing your intro, and I was thinking, you're like, hey, I'm Brent Branchett, I'm Connections Pastor here. And I was about to say, and the stuffing of the Oreo for two entire, now three.
We might want to switch
episodes.
Because you and I kind of have bald heads now and put the hair guy in the middle, and then
The hair guy.
because the middle of the Oreo is different, and we are the same.
And that's a reverse Oreo cookie.
Yeah. So there you go.
Although I think with my brown hair and his brown hair, you are the best contestant for the stuffing.
Okay. And nobody likes hair in their frosting, right? So there you go.
Exactly.
Boom chakalaka.
Oh, gee. Bye. I'm just kidding. It's not the end.
All right. So got a joke again from Debbie. She has been feeding me jokes. I will say, jokes are just rolling in.
You gonna start paying her?
Yeah, I'm going to have to start bringing
Debbie
her
and
on.
her terrible jokes.
I know. Brent and is copying Debbie's terrible jokes.
And a not very good jingle.
But she's pretty good. She's pretty good. So anyway.
She hangs out with kids, so at the school.
I'm sure she gets them all day long.
Yeah, I don't know where she gets them, but she gets them.
It's like, hey,
she hits me up.
Hit me up. Give me the latest joke.
Yeah. She hits me up almost every week.
Got anything about Pokemon?
So she gave me two, but I liked this one. And not that I totally hated the other one. But so how did Moses part the Red Sea?
Very, very carefully.
With a seesaw.
With a seesaw.
Seesaw. Saw. A saw. A seesaw.
What part? Where's that in Exodus?
No, obviously, we need to get you to read Exodus a little more thoroughly. So,
Got it. Okay, seesaw. Get it. That's how he parted it.
I liked it. I thought it was cute.
What was the other one?
I don't have another one. I didn't write down another
You didn't
one.
memorize the joke.
Thank you, Brent. So how long does it take you really, when you're not stealing them from Debbie, to come up with one of those jokes?
No, I a long time ago when I started it, I kind of just stole a bunch or wrote down a bunch. So I've got a list of them that I haven't even gotten to yet. But
so this isn't ending anytime soon. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, no, this isn't ending very, very soon. But it can end if you're tired of them. So, so again, at Rabbit Trail at obcc.church. Let us know if you want this to end or not.
Oh, or please, by all means, send better jokes. So anyways. All right, Stephan, help us out here. Like redeem these sections, because now it's time to go into the dark side of the internet and see what we come up with.
The dark web.
Dark side.
First impressions.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Interwebs.
Take a look at the comments this particular last couple weeks, and I'll just start off with the simple ones. We did one on relationships matter and the heart of God's law. It was a short and the person just commented, "Say what? H-U?"
Ooh.
Hate you.
No, just
hope it's not
pause
hate.
for a moment on the
Say what?
profundancy of that statement.
Profundancy.
Yes. Did I make that up, or is that in the dictionary?
That was a made-up word.
It was
The profundity.
It was profound. So it
and
was
funny.
Profundant.
Oh, and you cost money up front.
I'm done.
Isn't fondant what you put on cake? Isn't that
Fondant.
I'm just-
I
Profondant.
become the overly serious person. in
I'm
this group.
anti-fondant.
There you go. I am too. I hate
Oh, I don't
fondant.
like fondant at all.
I hate it.
It's good to make picture or designs and stuff,
People
but it
don't
tastes
realize
nasty.
that there's a cross behind you that's made of fondant, I think.
Ugh.
Ooh,
It's a cake. Everything's a cake now.
yes. People just thought it was kind of an icon because of your holiness, but it's not.
I don't know if you can even see it. I don't know if they can see it.
It's not really
Oh,
Nope.
okay.
good.
What?
We should move it to where people
That
can see
trail
it.
thing behind me is made of fondant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're made of fondant if you stare at us long enough. We're full of cake.
All right. People are like, why are they talking about this? Move on.
Okay, I think we're hungry.
Because we are just, we are
You came for a
little
rabbit
boys who just spiral out of control really quickly.
Hate you.
Yeah. So thanks for the comments, Jason Bourne, 1974-1.
Is that when he was born?
I don't know if that's the number of the sequel he was from. This feels like there's a lot of Jason Bourne movies. But anyway, enjoy your spying. The next one is just talking about the election. We just had election come up, and this person just had a question about with the election coming up, would you consider a podcast on what's going on in the country and the divisions and the voting biblically, which I think is pretty cool.
I think that'd be a good idea, especially, like sometime September, October, in October maybe, do one about just how do you vote biblically, how
Like
you
this.
vote as a Christian.
With
Yeah,
the black pen.
One line straight across.
Ooh, fill in the circle.
They
Don't-
pray about
Don't
it.
go outside the lines.
Pray for your ink.
Typically, it's skip. Oh, I'm just going to vote on all the different propositions. There we go.
Yeah, we didn't. What was it? You've done sermons on like biblical worldview stuff. I can't remember one that.
Yeah.
And we should probably find that sermon. But
Yeah, no, we've done entire sit down conversations. I think that was in 2016, the last one we really got big, and I always go back to like apply the 10 Commandments to any of the propositions. Those are the major things, and then the real question today is what do you do when you have two really, when you have two candidates that maybe you don't know, like if you can trust either one. Or,
what do you do with
go
the
to
lesser of
party
two evils?
platforms? What happens when you don't agree with both the platforms? What do you do then? And then it's a matter of asking questions of which is going to move evil for I think you got to learn how to triage your
worldview.
The questions, the issues. And there's a lot of good documents and stuff out there on a Christian worldview, especially from the ethics committee of the Southern Baptists. They have a very, very good little thing out there on dealing with how do you rightly order certain what we'd call creation issues like life and those kinds of things.
And part of it
Justice,
too is
life.
just, I think part of it is defining your purpose for voting. Is it because you want good leadership and good representation, or because you want to usher in the end times? So, I think part of that is just, what is your purpose for voting?
What are you advocating? Voting for the Antichrist or not voting for the Antichrist? I'm a little worried here. No, I think it is a good question because it is very, very sticky. And I think it's a very strong worldview question, knowing what are my worldviews? What are my values? Do they align with Scripture? And then evaluating the candidates and figuring out what that is and which one is closer to that particular. And then there's a difference between rhetoric and what people do. So you have to be able to evaluate not just what people say and believe, but what they do as well. Because I do think character does matter, but it also being competent and capable of doing things also matters as well.
So there's another question of worldview that came into my head while we're talking about this. Like if you could for sure know the person that was running was the Antichrist, would you even be able to stop him from getting elected?
That's heavy.
Yeah, you got to...
I will say, you watch the news, whether you watch CNN or Fox News, and, whoever gets elected is ushering in the apocalypse, I'll tell you.
Just ask whatever party is on the other side.
Yeah,
It'll tell you who the
exactly.
Antichrist
The
is.
bottom line is, it doesn't matter what goes on. Everything's ushering in the apocalypse because God's just waiting. He's the gun of
Every
He is
day is-
waiting patiently
One day
that
closer.
none that none would perish.
One day closer.
So the next comment is just from Cloud Watcher Sue 9086. I enjoy your camaraderie. So that was a little bit of light in the dark tunnel of the internet. That's fun.
And we want to commend them for such a nice comment. But, conspiracy theory, we were talking politics.
You're talking about
camaraderie, comrade. It's a communist statement.
Yeah, great.
So, I don't know how to take that, but I think that it was a
Sue's
nice
not
comment.
taking that very well.
I'm horrible today. I don't know. I've been locked up in my office too long.
Well, I'm going to lock you back in your office. You keep that up.
So then we had a really crazy short that it was you talking about what does the fox say that sparked a philosophical conversations on the value of shorts.
Oh, gosh.
So sometimes you get an AI choppy and it's trying to draw your attention towards the bigger episode. So if you want to know what the fox says, you should watch the sermon that you just
or
did.
You can go back to the 2016 video and just watch the whole thing.
But I think it was your intro to the sermon, and so you're just trying to say about popularity. You were talking about popularity.
Yeah, it was.
But it was
so
a
weird.
confusing.
Like, I really think this
confusing video. That one.
Retitle that "What AI Can Do to Your Introduction." It's just like absolutely moidalize the thing. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Moida, I tell you.
Moidalize it.
And then my favorite comment comes
It's a
from.
made-up word by Greg.
We're making up words today.
Yay.
My favorite comment is Danger96. The church isn't a democratic organization. You do what we say Jesus wants, and that's it. Wild message, Pastor. Drawing in-group and out-group lines in the sanctuary isn't the message Jesus was spreading. Dun, dun, dun. They didn't write
First
that.
of all, we don't call it a sanctuary. We call it an auditorium.
Yeah.
Second,
Some people do.
oh wait,
it.
this is your first impression.
That was a lot.
No,
of,
I don't
that
want
was
to jump
a
in.
lot of confliteration in that statement.
Confliteration.
Conflicting alliterations.
I'm gonna just see how many words I can make up for this day.
That's gonna be a whole new segment, folks.
Words Brent may get it this week.
Yeah. He's never been good at English. So
Yeah.
Jesus wasn't in a. I agree at one sense where I was like, if I was strong, Iron Manning or whatever we call steel manning his arguments, like, yeah, Jesus wasn't in a sanctuary. He wasn't talking about a group of people in a room. He was talking about a group of people on a shore. So that, yes, I guess directly it wouldn't apply, but at the same time, the very essence of the text is that Jesus is differentiating between himself, the disciples, and the crowd. Like it is, and from this point on, that is the last thing, and everything from there is about his differentiating between the in groups and the out groups. That's a whole next legitimate. He chooses 12 guys out of all of these people.
Chooses 3,
and he keeps going.
Yeah,
there is an in group, there is an out group.
There's
in
no
the text.
If you're using in-group,
clear.
if you're using in-group, out-group distinctions to draw in something bad or good, that's an odd choice. Because to me, no matter what you do, if you have a group, someone's on the outside of it, and it's not a matter of drawing in-group, out-group distinctions. It's a matter of why. If you're doing it because you're just wanting to be mean, that's one thing. I don't see Jesus doing that. If you're doing it because there's a mission, there's a vision, and people align along that in different areas of their life, and that makes you either closer to the Lord at certain points of his ministry, or it makes you in the crowd. We're not saying that everyone in the crowd isn't going to be a disciple at some point. It's just they're in that space currently where they're at, and Jesus is either drawing them out or showing the distinction where they want to be. And that's everything he does in all of the scriptures. He's calling people out. It's not a democracy because Jesus is the one that gets the vote when he makes a disciple. He says, you want to be my disciple? And you have a vote in the sense of whether you want to follow him. But that's about it. It's not a democratic organization at all in that sense.
In another sense, it's not a it depends on what church we're talking about, because some churches do run themselves as a, quote, democratic association, but all of them would understand
authority. Jesus,
that their votes and their decisions in a congregational church are really are trusting that Jesus is bringing about the wisdom amongst the full of the congregation. So, I mean, there's legitimately an entire denomination called the Congregational Church, and it's a democratic church.
Well, I mean, churches vote, but that isn't the thing we're talking about when we're talking about discipleship. It's about you choosing whether you want to serve God or sit in the crowd and just take from what you hear from the message. and challenging yourself. Should I still be here, or should I move closer to the Lord and grow in my discipleship? Some people are comfortable just sitting in the congregation. We're not saying you're not included. In fact, most of what we do is including people who aren't even a part of the congregation, the crowd, or anyone else. We're going out to bring people in.
I mean, that was basically the idea of the message, is that the crowd is the open-ended group. It's the everybody come on in. And I do think a Sunday morning
should be inclusive.
Can be extremely inclusive, where people come in, they sit down, they listen, they get to be a part of that. But that doesn't mean that you're
a disciple.
The church. That doesn't mean they're now a disciple. That doesn't mean.
And it doesn't mean we're treating you mean either. It just means that we may be challenging you.
We're extremely happy when people show up. It's like, oh, we're excited you're here because we want to share with you what we found. I mean, really.
The other statement that's really weird is, and you do what we say Jesus wants, and that's it. I mean, to be honest with you, every church you go to looks at the Bible and says, we want the congregation and the crowd to do what Jesus wants. Why would you have a church if that wasn't the point? So no matter what, if you're establishing a church that's based around Jesus, anyone who speaks is asking and petitioning and trying to convince and persuade people to do what Jesus wants, and that has to come through their filter of understanding. So you have to believe the Holy Spirit can work with flawed people to instruct other flawed people on how to get closer to Him. But as soon as you establish a church and a pastor, you're going to have someone instructing you on what Jesus wants for your life. Now, you have freedom in the sense that you can evaluate that on your own because you have a Bible and you have your ability to have the congregation and other people speak into your life. But it is what church is. If you're going to church and no one tells you what Jesus wants and no one petitions you to try to do it, then why are you going there? Well, what a waste of time. You could just sit at home and ask yourself what you think Jesus wants. So I don't understand the comments at all. And then again, in-groups, out-groups are always a part of every group. It doesn't matter whether you're going to Disneyland or not. There are people who work there and people that don't. There are families that have kids and they have parents.
Are you telling me that Disneyland has you can't come back here unless you're a crew member or something?
Yeah, they have limitations to where you can go. If you pay more money, you get to the front of the line.
Hey, we keep talking about Disneyland. Eventually the AI will cut it out. We'll have another hot top hit for
But I'm just saying, I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to steel man this argument. What kind of church would not have in-group, out-group distinctions? There would just be chaos, right? Everyone does what they want to do. There's no order. There's nobody saying like we're in charge of the leadership and you're just a part of the congregation, or you don't.
Homogeneity.
It's bizarre.
Where there's no differentiations, no distinctions. Legitimately, it's meeples.
Yeah.
As far as you can see, it's a meeple is a small little wooden chopped out piece.
For those of your game players.
And it's just they're all the same. They're just the same cut, same color all the way through. That's the only way you don't have an in-group or out-group, and that's if you don't put them into rows, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking like even in socialism where everybody's supposed to be equal, they have the government and they have you. Right. So there's an in-group, out-group distinction real quick.
Wait until the AI runs the government, then then we're all in the in-group.
But I mean, Jesus alone has often offended people by saying there are people who are going to be sheep and goats, and I'm going to separate them. One group is my followers, the other group's not my followers. That's an important distinction of an in-group, out-group. So if you read Jesus and you continue to read Jesus, he does make distinctions on who are followers and who are not. Even asks people or challenges people.
Yep.
So, Interesting. I'm always curious as to where that stuff comes from.
Well, this was the first sermon in the new series called Friends.irl, and I had to lean over to a millennial that I was sitting next to and go, what does IRL mean?
Okay, boomer.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know. So in real life is what it means. And so you started off the sermon, Greg, and you were talking about what is a friend. That was the topic of the sermon. And some of the things you mentioned at the beginning of the sermon, number one, that God didn't make man to be lonely, and just that idea, I think that, God himself is a Trinitarian God. So, he's always been in fellowship and community with himself. He created us in his image. He created us for community. Even said, it's not good that man be alone. Let me create for you a helpmate. But one of the points you started on was just right now, our culture, we are as a people chronically lonely. And you gave a statistic that I don't remember how long ago, so you can clarify that, but it used to be where people hung out with their friends or had fellowship with their friends 60 hours a month, and we're down to 20 hours a month on the average. And so loneliness is a chronic situation going on, and people feel lonelier now than they ever have before.
This comes from the Surgeon General's advisory on loneliness, and in their annual daily average in minutes. So the annual daily average in minutes, it started going into 2003. I guess this is social engagements with friends went from 60, and they're not
60 minutes.
I guess it's 60 minutes. To be quite honest, this is not the most clear set of statistics that you're going to find out there, because it says it's a decrease of 20 hours per month of time with friends. So it goes from whatever 60 is, because I guess that would be 60 minutes, and then in 2003, by 2005, it drops to 50, goes up a little bit, and then after the advent of the iPhone in 2013, when it's ubiquitous by that point, another big word, when it's everywhere, it drops within 4 years down to 35, and then just drops like a rock in 2020 to 20. So average of 20 minutes of social engagement minutes, annual daily average. What is an annual daily average in minutes?
So I would say,
so they say it's a decrease of
20 minutes
hours
a day, if you take the
20
year.
hours per month, 20 hours per month. People had social engagement with friends has decreased 20 hours per month. Okay. Used to be, in 2003, we spent 20 more extra hours every month with our friends. And I can attest to that. Like, I think that through, and how few times game nights and playing basketball with people and those kinds of things are not as common. Now, I was just curious, what would you guys attribute to that? I mean, I've said cell phones, but there are some other big factors. What do you guys think? If you're to take a guess,
I mean, again,
because we don't know, we're just guessing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pre-COVID, I remember, and I mean, even us three and some other people, we'd go to the movies, we'd hang out, we'd maybe catch a meal, go to the movies, and then talk about the movie after the meal. And really, since COVID, nobody's going to the movies anymore. So that's kind of removed. And although you're not like, ooh, we're conversing while we are, watching the movie, I think that there's a communal feel while you're watching the movie, and then the conversations afterwards. I think that's one area where it's dropped off. And how about you?
Well, I mean, there's so many factors that I'm thinking about. So prior to COVID, there was gluten in the bread. People weren't fearful. They weren't as isolated. There were welcoming spaces. There were better movies because people weren't fighting over the political aspects of movies. Most of our social institutions of common hanging out and stuff were actually challenged, even within the church. And so people became more polarized in their opinions and what they wanted for either, Black Lives Matter or politics, or if it was just whether you want to take the jab or you don't want to take the jab. And because of that, people retreated back to their homes when they were isolated and to their major relationships. And so you cut off all the ancillary friendships that you would just kind of have. And I think that taught a muscle memory of trying to be more exclusive. We all wore masks, so you don't see empathy. You don't see people's faces anymore. Also, all of our routines were turned on their head, and only the vital relationships that we needed in order to sustain ourselves are the ones most people kept. And so, and then people were afraid to call their friends because a lot of people did find out their friends changed their opinion and don't want to talk to people with different opinions. So I've lost friends over politics and things like that. Also, I just think that with the advent of technology, people think they're connected, but they actually aren't. It's the illusion of being connected with people, but it's not.
They have a lot of interesting things here, like factors that shape social connection. You've got like chronic disease. People who get a chronic disease, they have a harder time being able to get out and go connect with people. You've got, they have sensory and functional impairments, mental health, physical health, personality, race, gender. We know that mental health itself skyrocketed during COVID. So there are a lot of people who, once like some things set in, like depression, sometimes you need somebody outside of you to get you moving. And if you're depressed and you don't know, and you're not connecting with your old friends, and you're not connected with people, and you just got forgotten, it's just going to continue to spiral. There's life stage, structure, function, quality. What I found was interesting is there's a connection in a lot of literature and podcasts that I'm interacting with. It's like you had social media advent, really, is what's gone on, and then it's the AI generated algorithms, or these algorithms, not AI generated, but algorithms that suddenly we're locking you into this feedback loop. It's not, they don't, because it's
especially Facebook during that time.
Right. It's not aimed at giving you more information. It's aimed at feeding you what they think you'll click on. And if you like this, they'll give you more and give you more. And so this creates this unintentional feedback loop that everybody gets kind of caught in. And then you think everybody's just like me. I'm thinking this way. Like sometimes my wife and I'll, get outside of the Christian world a little bit, and we're just like, oh, we forgot nobody thinks like us. Like there's our little group in Corona is not the sample size of everybody else in Corona, kind of thing. And that can be disheartening and confusing, especially for people who are stepping out to try to build friendships and stuff. So that feedback loop locks you into a certain set of people that you think should think like you, and you can't even believe somebody would think differently. And and then now you start to demonize the different group, and you're going to get lonely because your in-group's getting smaller. Because I've noticed that we keep chopping it down even tighter. Like in the conservative, Republican camps, well, no, now it's the populist and the conservatives, and
libertarian conservatives,
libertarians and the populists, and
isolationists.
In the church, it's
neocons.
It's the we've got the broad Christians, the evangelicals, but we're the Reformed, and you guys are Pentecostals, and you know what? You guys are just heretics because you don't agree with my political position. And it's just like we're like chop 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 chop. We got these heresy hunters and podcasts and internet running around trying to divide it up even more, and it is a mess, and it all tends towards isolation, and that tends, I think, towards that loneliness. So
also a lot of people passed away, so a lot of the older people did lose their friends over COVID or something else that happened in their lives. So I've noticed that has been on the rise for a lot of people, and that makes people isolate.
And I mean, I think that during COVID too, and I mean, we're getting far enough away from COVID that it doesn't affect, but there's residual consequences of it. I mean, one of the things that really happened, I mentioned going to the movies, that they're not putting out movies like they used to. Everything's going to streaming now, and there's so many different streaming things, and people are staying home and binge watching. So, you like a show and you find it and it's 10 seasons in, and, you stay home watching 10 seasons.
It's not a social event anymore.
Yeah, and it really is. That's exactly right. It's not a social event anymore. Now it is a withdrawal event now.
So would you advocate for the government making a law that you can only do movies released at the theaters? I'm just kidding. To bring about social cohesion. And
the movie industry is struggling because they in the future is going to be a place where movie theaters, if they keep going this route, are just going to be a place that are special. You have to pay a lot of money for. So you go in and you're going to get like a luxury meal and then a movie, and so they're going to have to be specialized because we're actually eroded all of our common spaces. So the movie theater is probably one of the last common spaces that we all shared at some point. But there's no place where everyone goes that often and hangs out as a communal effect or as a communal thing. I mean, at least we're in our circles. It may be different in different states. Some states push the opposite direction to gather in places because they wanted to exercise their freedom.
Yeah, we already know in Corona there was already a difficulty of building relationships in general because we're a commuter town.
Yeah.
So you're adding most of your time in a car stuck away, or
you live far away from where you work.
You don't live. Your work people aren't near enough to be your friends, and if you're going to make them friends, it's a long drive to go make those connections. And so the other crazy thing is in Corona, if you're not in sports, you're on the out group. Oh no, because there's a legitimate reality that most children are all into these organized sports. And we're talking to some people and that are kind of in the world of sports in the school districts and stuff that go to our church. And they were just like, oh yeah, we have so many professional athletes that come out of the Corona area because we are so fixated on sports in our city that you get all kinds of people that are just this is the route. So people move into town for the sports. The sports is a big deal.
And the average kid can't just walk on and play on a team anymore.
Nope, not anymore.
So they're excluded, and so you also one of the first things you had on the handout was loneliness. The feeling developed when you've lost someone. I mean, was that your quote, or was that something you pulled?
That's something I pulled from Justin Earley. His argumentation is, I think it's fundamentally sound in the sense that you can't experience a feeling of loneliness when you haven't had something. It's like when loneliness is acute and occurs as a deep emotion in loss. It's a form of loss of relationship. Loneliness exists because of the feeling of loneliness exists because of the loss of something. So I had a marriage and it broke, or I had these friends and they moved away. I've lost that ability to have them, and so there's a mourning effect, and that's where loneliness is the feeling of the loss.
Kind of the idea that you can't experience great grief without experiencing great love.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because there's a lot of psychological definitions for loneliness, and so I'm trying to reconcile some of that. I think what resonates with me is the fact that it's a feeling of isolation, social isolation or friendship isolation, and that's a kind of a loss, is that you don't have something that you desire as well. Because often people can be in a crowd and feel lonely. They can be connected to people and feel lonely, and that becomes because they have a lack of a connection to people.
Yeah, and so I think that we would begin as we get into the series, we're going to see that there's different levels of community connection. I think there are different levels of kinds of loneliness. Like you can have a lot of acquaintances and not feel socially lonely in the sense that I have a lot of contacts. I could see a lot of people every day.
Yeah.
But nobody is in your life at a certain level like a teammate. Like I don't have anybody to hang out with. I go to church every week and I got nobody to hang out with during the week. That's a different form of loneliness. Like I don't have anybody to goof off with, have some games, go see a movie with, whatever. Then there's an even deeper loneliness, which is like I could have guys I'm hanging out with, but I feel like nobody knows me. I feel like a charlatan amongst these people. Like nobody asks the deeper question. I feel like I'm being used as just somebody in the group. That's a form of loneliness that's deeper than the feeling like I got nobody to hang out with. And so the deeper loneliness is that kind of I'm not known. And then the ultimate loneliness, I believe, is the kind of loss of the spiritual connection with God. I think it's the depth of the fall itself. There is a reality that I long to know my purpose. I long to know who made me. I long to know God, and
you were made to be a part of the community.
You were. I think. I one of the things I wanted to point out, I didn't really dive into this. I think the loneliness is akin to C.S. Lewis's argument about heaven. Lewis made an argument that you would get these hints of these great desires for something that was perfect and pristine and utopian and wonderful. He's like, how can you have a longing for that which you can never have satisfied? You don't have a hunger that can't be satisfied by food. You don't have a thirst that can't be satisfied by water. Why do you have a hunger or this longing for a utopian eternality that
doesn't exist,
that can't be actually satisfied?
It's like if you have a thirst, you want something to drink. Right. If you want to eat, if you have a hunger pain, it's probably for
I think
food.
There's a primal loneliness that comes out as, oh my gosh, I just want to be known ultimately. Now,
and be connected.
And be connected. And I ultimately want to know why I'm here. I think it shows up as a loss of purpose, a loss of drive, and we think we can find it with all these idols. They're real idols: power, sex, fame,
even just distractions.
Yeah, and so the entertainment was an idol, muses, all these things, right? And I think that these things are all this apologetic call to you are fundamentally not hole. There's a disconnection going on. And well, what would fill that? Well, not a bunch of gods who are capricious and busy with themselves and ignoring you, but there needs to be more than one, because one God isn't going to be enough, because how would he create relationship in the first place? If you've got this God who's sitting up there all by himself yelling at you, you got to worship me, which is, I think, how people hear Christianity, by the way. I think people hear us saying there's this one God, and he's up there going, you need to worship me, you need to serve me, you need to love me. And that sounds so egocentric. It's like, how do you break that? Except that God is three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, who worship one another, love each other. They're fully satisfied. They don't need our worship. They don't need us. They can command it because they're worthy of it. Just like I would command respect from my children to my wife. She's worthy of it and expected, and she would command it from me. And I could command respect for myself, and that would be okay because of my position as the father. But the Trinity is like, yeah, no, we're God, I'm God, you need to worship. But in their humility, they point to the other persons of the Trinity, fully knowing that there's this fullness of who they are. Trinity is crazy, difficult to explain and talk through all the time, but I think it's the only explanation why there's a relationship at all. Otherwise, how does a monotheistic God have any kind of love in the sense of an absolute monotheism, like Allah? Like, this is an argument I've made with Jehovah's Witnesses who have an absolute monotheism.
They don't believe in a Trinity.
You agree that God is love. They say, yes. I say, well, who does he love? And they have to say himself, and so he's a megalomaniac, because there always is an object of love, and we didn't always exist. So he couldn't love us all the time. He couldn't love the angels all the time. So who did he love before the creation? There has to be a person to love, and that's where the Father's loved the Son, and the Son has loved the Spirit, and Spirit and all that has always been eternal. There now is a fundamental reality for relationship, not just physical relationship. One of the things people ignore is the fact that everything is based on relationship. The computer, sits on the table. I'm before the camera, you're in front of your computer. Or listening, the earbuds are in your ears and you're listening to these prepositional phrases, these connections that make things fit together logically or physically, are all relational concepts.
Yeah, part of the problem is we take the word worship and we think it means like being doormatted or something. Most people, when they admire, they want to please, they find value in it and want to be connected. Those are all aspects of worship, and you're going to gravitate towards something to worship, whether it's God or not, because that is what we're claiming is that's what we're designed to do, to worship something and to give to something greater than ourselves, or something that brings value. And if your values are skewed and you don't know what that is, then you're going to link to something else that's going to harm you. So what God is saying is, I love you, I care for you. He's not forcing you to do that in the sense that you have to choose to serve him or not, but it is the best thing for you. And the closest thing you can relate it to is a relationship. Two people are married, they love each other. Their union creates another person and invites that person to be a part of the family. They don't say, well, okay, you're on your own now, because we have our relationship. And so part of that is the child has to respect the parents, has to grow, and they disciple that child to be a part of the family, because that's what they were designed and made to do, whether they like it or not. It's the family that they're born into. And I think a lot of people rebel against being born and being created by the all-powerful creator that knows you better than anything and wants you to be in his family. You were born for that. And you can think of that as, I don't like this family, or you can think about it as, oh, I love this family, but it's a choice that you make.
So the statement that loneliness is developed when you've lost somebody, but could it also, loneliness come into play when you realize you don't have something? Like, somebody going through life, they're content, and their friendships or their relationships are pretty superficial, and then they see that relationship, that friendship that is just really solid and deep, and then you have a yearning for that kind of a relationship that draws out loneliness in you.
Yeah, again, I think it's because there's a fundamental loneliness underneath, that we long to be fully and truly known, And the only one who can really answer that fundamental problem is not another friend, it's God. And so true friendships, for their fullest sense, will sit on a relationship where the Lord is that primal friend, where he is the one who knows you fully and completely, loves you, bore your sins on the cross, rose from the dead to give you life, has that relationship with you in which you are all shame, guilt, and dishonor is gone, even though you are fully guilty and should be ashamed of yourself and dishonored. Right? I mean, all of that is true, and yet God has loved you in such that way. Now, I think what people are feeling when they see a relationship like that, and they feel that loneliness, is the primal loneliness. The deepest shape of loneliness is that I am not known. I don't love myself. I'm scared of even my own sin and shame. And to see two people who can carry it for each other like that, that is, wow. Yeah, now I feel lonely. I feel really lonely. Well, yeah, that's because you were made to not be alone. You were made for the primal connection with God and then with others. Like, I think that loneliness is an echo of the original, but then yes, it is aimed at a real relationship.
Which kind of leads into what one of the things you were talking about was just loneliness. For the most part, loneliness stems from sin, right? Because it's separated us from God, and it's caused distrust and issues in relationships, human to human,
and with yourself.
And how does that do it to yourself?
Well, would you like to right now in front of the entire internet, confess the darkest thing you've ever done? I mean, it's like, if you were, and why you did it. I don't think that really, there's many things we keep private on purpose for a good reason. And that's because
there are many things you say?
Yes, I think there are many things we keep private on purpose for reasons, sometimes all good to us. So maybe not ultimately good, but all good to us, that honestly I keep for myself. I know a lot of really confident people that shouldn't be confident in themselves. But they're confident in themselves because they're not focused on the things that they've done wrong. They just keep getting up and going. That doesn't mean
it's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, it's exactly. You explain that whole
cognitive
concept.
Dissonance is you don't grasp. People cannot psychologically grasp that they are bad for very long. They have to compensate for the reality of a situation. So usually they use smoking as a situation. That someone knows that smoking's bad for them. They find out it's bad for them, but they can't they can't keep that in their head, the badness of smoking for them. So they go, well, at least I'm not drinking. So the idea is to have some kind of mask or to excuse away or to deny or obfuscate the responsibility of feeling that way because you can't feel that as bad. So you turn it into a good. And so a murderer is not like, I think killing is because I'm bad. I like to kill people. Usually a murderer will say it was good for me to kill that person. They didn't deserve to live. They're calling their act good because they can't deal with the evil that's on the inside. And that's not a religious thing. It is, to me, a religious thing. But it isn't in psychology. It's found common when you're counseling someone. They can't, so they project out to someone else. They can't look internal and see the sin that's really there, is what we would say. Or they can't see the detriment of their view of reality is skewed. So they have to cover themselves in order to continue on. And so that would be a cognitive dissonance. And we all have it to some degree.
Yeah, wouldn't you say that if somebody even tried to point it out, that you would use defense mechanisms to keep that?
Usually it's projection.
The other person.
Yeah, someone's often accusing you of cheating a lot over and over and over again. The question would be, are you cheating? Or because the idea of doing that is it just leaks out. It's like you're obsessed with trying to keep what I consider biblically to keep the leaves covering your sin instead of confessing them and coming into the light and being healed. You need to stay in the dark and you need to blame other people in order to stay there.
I'll give you a great example of this. My wife read Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. And she's like reading it and she's like not resonating with any experience this woman brings forth, any of these things. And in the end, she's like, when she finished the book, she's like, logically, the best thing I can say is this woman was a racist. She realized she was a racist.
Yeah.
Couldn't handle that she was so racist in her upper New York echelon life. She assumed everyone else must be racist too, and therefore I will write a book about how everybody else is racist just like me in order to make myself feel better that I've discovered I'm a racist. In my confession and accusation of everyone else, it makes me feel better. And so the book is really, I mean, it was just really interesting because
I'm not bad. I'm just like everybody
Well,
else.
no,
Yes,
this happens,
but in a very specific way, like so that I'm alleviated
of the responsibility of internal.
No, like look at me, I'm now a hero.
Yeah,
because I'm leading you all out of this horrible condition that you all don't even realize you're in. Because even if you claim you're not, well, I know you are because I've experienced this in my soul, and it must be in everyone else's too.
And if you say you're not, that just proves how racist you are because you don't see it.
And this is a problem. Like this is how people hear Christians. Like, I'm a sinner, therefore you all must be sinners too. But that's not what we're saying. Sin is a broader category than a specific sin. I would never tell someone the sin I have is the same one everybody else has.
Well, that literally, I went to a conference. It was like a men's group thing, and the guy was telling me kind of more graphically about how he sins about things, and then he just said, "Now you guys do the same thing," and I was like, "No, that isn't the way I sin. I sin completely different than that." And there was an argument that I was like, "No, dude." We're all corrupt differently. Not all of us. We have patterns that are similar to one another, but like there is a individualized experience that we each have, but also there's a common experience we all have. The root of it is that we're all having to deal with our sins, but to assume that everyone sins just like that is really odd, and to get angry over it is odd too, because your perception of everyone is that they're exactly like you.
It's a comforting thing to think that it's a protection mechanism, and I think that it's natural for humans to do this projection. This protection. This I'm actually really a good person. It's okay. Don't look at me. And I think that's
how you make friends a lot of times.
Genesis. It's why they put on fig leaves. Who are they hiding from? Mm-hmm. The whole point is there was nobody to hide from but the people who knew them fully. Mm-hmm. They hide from God. They hide from each other, and ultimately, they're putting it on to hide from themselves. Like you see it. It's not me. It was the woman that you gave me. That's just the fig leaf and verbal.
It's not me. It's the serpent.
Right.
Fig or leaf God. And verbal. God, and you did this to me.
And I think in counseling terms they call it the external locus of control, right? Because I'm doing bad things because of this outward situation, and not because there is something inside of me that is, I don't have to own it.
There are people who use locus of control as a means not to self-explore, and it is a form of cognitive dissonance to blame everything in your life that's going wrong on everything outside of you, that you have no part to play, that there's nothing that you can contribute. You're just a victim of the system. And the problem with that is if everyone's a victim
against me, although I have just continually making bad decisions.
Well, no, just think about it.
Where I go into the church and everybody's judging me, but actually you're judging everybody there.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is weird is the idea that like if everyone is not responsible for their own problem, then how come we have problems at all? Right? So it's like, well, it's not me, it's everyone else. Well, if everybody thought that way, then it would be no one's fault, right? And how did these things get here then? And so the idea that you can blame society without having some contribution to the society is odd and peculiar, because if you externalize all of your frustrations, pains, and flaws on everyone else, but you internalize yours and make excuses for your own, that is a form of cognitive dissonance. Most people will do that. It's with driving. It's like, that guy's a jerk. Look what he did. But you're late and you're driving like, well, I had the laundry and the kids, and so you internalize everyone else's struggle, but you externalize everyone else, and so that happens a lot.
And that's and again, you had talked about friendship being that thing where, somebody knows you as fully as somebody can know you and still loves you. And I think that's important. I think when it comes to our relationship with God, because we don't have to pretend that we're holy and righteous. We understand that we're not. We understand that He loves us anyway. He paid the price to redeem us, and He is in the process of reshaping our lives and giving us His righteousness, taking away our shame and sin. But and so I think that way, if we have a true relationship with God, it will help us not be lonely or feel lonely, because God is there with us all the time. We also are created for community, so we do need His representation physically around us as well. And then that's where that friendship part comes in, where you have to have those relationships that really know you, because like there was I think it was Tiger Woods, and in his heyday, you know, one of the things he said in an interview was it was so hard for him to find love because he could never determine whether they loved him as a person or Tiger Woods, the celebrity, you know? And so he never felt like he had the confidence in a relationship that they love me for me and not for other things.
I'm sure every famous person and politician probably has that at some deep core wound, which is why they're running around trying to get the fame. And it scares them to death to actually open that door up and be exposed like that. I think Mark Wahlberg was one of those who kind of talked about that concept too a little bit as he moved back into his Catholicism. It was like he just realized how fake everything had become. So,
yeah, I mean, again, the cognitive dissonance can extend to your whole social circles. I mean, we're really good at picking groups that validate our own opinions without ever wanting to challenge it. The problem is like you have a social relationship and there's an expectation that you have. You become lonely when the reality of that expectation isn't met, you know. And so some people have to go, well, I need to be what I am. I can't confront myself with my sins, so I need to surround myself with people who think like me. And again, we're back to the cognitive dissonance thing. But it is sad. It is, you see people live in entire isolation and loneliness without ever realizing that part of it might be that your worldview is so small and you don't like to be challenged. You're missing out on what the truth has to offer you.
Yeah, and again, you know, I know I bring up marriage a lot, but that was one of the things I felt like I learned too late into my marriage. Not too late, but later than I would have liked, is the idea that, you know, in a marriage relationship, and I know that you say it's not friendship, we'll get into that in a minute, but one of the things I realized is, you know, I think we can rationalize our poor behavior, you know, we can excuse it away, we can project onto other things, but I think we think highly of ourselves for the most part, or at least superficially, and we don't want others to see the chinks in our armor, right? And so when my wife would confront me that I did something that made her mad or did something that hurt her, my first response would be go into protection mode and convince her it wasn't my fault. You know, I didn't do anything bad. You know, if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have done that. And it only made her madder at me, you know? And part of that I finally came to a realization, I haven't really perfected it yet, but that I came to the realization is she knows my flaws. You know, she knows the darkest and worst parts of me, and she chooses to love me anyway, and she chooses to devote her life to me each and every day. And if I would just go, you're right, I was a bad person, I should not have done that, I am sorry, that would go so much further than trying to protect my image before her, you know? And so I do think that vulnerability in a relationship grows the confidence that, not that you can stay in your brokenness and stay in your sin, but you have that confidence that they truly know you and they love you, you know? And you don't feel like you have to hide and then always wonder, okay, would this person really still love me if they knew this about me? You know?
That's exactly right. So, I mean, I think that's the point of the kind of friendship I'm talking about. And I think that what's sad is that we should be able to learn that outside of a marriage. In fact, I think it's a primary thing that you should take into your marriage, not something that you learn from your marriage. Mm-hmm. I believe we would have better marriages if we were all better single people. Mm-hmm. If we had all been better friends, in general, we would learn the contours of a relationship before you're ever in a situation of a marriage, because you have that kind of a tight reality with other human beings, I think. And then it just makes the marriage able to go even further than having to learn all the things that we should have learned from each other, in that sense. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah, and
I never make much sense, but you know.
Well, no, when when I was in singles ministry, you know, there are a lot of things you can learn from before you're married that are important to learn, because once you're in the marriage, it's hard to learn some of those things. And one of them is, how do you treat the opposite sex on a friendship basis? There's limitations to those kind of friendships, but there are some people that just avoid it because they're so worried about temptation. They never talk to the opposite sex. Then they get married and they isolate from anyone on the opposite sex, and then you end up working someplace and there's nothing but men or women, and you don't know how to deal with that. You could have worked that out in a setting with other people without all these expectations, and learn your boundaries as a single person to find good friendships and good relationships, platonic ones, and the limitations of what they're like and what your temptations are. And the only way to do that is to navigate through that with a group of friends. Your friends are going to be like, man, this is the difference between what you say and what you do, or this is what we think you're doing. So it gives you the feedback. The problem with life is the little lie is that you think that we think everything you can be learned as an individual. I legitimately think there's things about yourself you cannot know at all without other people. That's how humans are designed. And so you have to work with someone else to see yourself. And that's hard to do. And if you're trying to navigate that away from the truth, then you're going to have problems.
I think also you want to apply that to people with same-sex attraction, because one of the difficulties for someone with same-sex attraction is trying to make a real, true friendship with another person of the same sex.
Platonic, without sex
without the sexualization happening. And the more you can do that, the more you actually are reintegrating to masculinity. One of the things you'll notice with one of the good evidences that somebody hasn't done that is that they struggle with same-sex attraction, they only have female friends. And so
you're talking males,
I'm talking
females.
males, or females will only have, like, most females are capable of navigating this for some difference. I've noticed with a lot of like younger girls who struggle with same-sex attraction, they often don't just go have guy friends because they're struggling with a different thing. They're oftentimes struggling with kind of a disdain for men. So they'll have only female friends. And if you have same-sex attraction, in both cases, female, female, male, male, you have to learn how to navigate those emotions to where, this isn't sexual. Yes, so I feel an attraction, but I'm going to surrender that over to Jesus, so that he would make this relationship a real one in which I'm really known, which means that eventually you have to admit and bring out of that dark, what I call that little black box in your heart, that you have that same-sex attraction. And I think it's important to do that, because you have to be loved by other men appropriately, and men who don't have that. Just as many men will bring out their struggle with, pornography, or their struggle with lust, or their struggle with pride. I mean, we have to be able to open these doors up and be loved in a friendship love, a true caring love that has nothing to do with romantic attractions or sexual attractions at all. And these are critical because there is an entanglement that's going on in our culture, even with hetero, just human beings, that when I feel intensely connected with someone, oh my gosh, that's sexual. It's not. It's not. It can't be. You can't do that, because the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are powerfully more into each other and connect with each other and have nothing to do with sexual attraction amongst the Trinity. It's just, that's not how he designed us. It is a function of our calling and our reality. That's why it will, in eternity, it will ultimately be over. That function of producing families and multiplying and all that will end. So
again, going back to, a friend is someone who knows you fully and loves you anyway. So quick question, number one, like, how many people do you have in your life that you feel, I mean, obviously they can't completely know you fully, but how many people in your life do you feel like these are true friends who know me fully?
You're asking me?
Yeah. And Stephen,
currently,
too.
I would say 5.
5?
Yeah. I have about 5 people that I would say they really know me fully. Like, they either hold me accountable, they know what's going on. I would say 4 of them are super, super, like, serious about the relationship in the sense that communicate and connect. Yeah. We want to introduce you to our new co-host, Siri.
You said super serious, and it's an activated Siri.
Joker activates Siri all the time. So I don't know.
How many? I don't know. I mean, I guess I struggle with the word fully, right? Because I feel like...
Again, what I said as definition of fully was that you don't hold things back from them in your... Like, you wouldn't hold back anything from your story or kind of, hey, I did this and I just need to... I did it, I don't like it, it's motivated me in this bad direction.
Well, like
the dark stuff.
I'll throw this stuff out. There are times when I've had accountability partners that I wouldn't consider friends. So I'm throwing out my deepest, darkest to somebody who's going to hold me accountable. And there's a friendship there, but it's not the same as someone who I can do that to and have a camaraderie with. Like, we're doing things in common, we're having other conversations.
I think that's where Jesus was clear, right? He said, it's not just that you're my friends because you obey. We're on the same page here. I do think friends, at minimum, stick with the buddy level, the friend, as that's how Matt's using it in the youth, or the teammate, as we're going to talk about, or the companion, as C.S. Lewis would call it. That's at minimum what a friend is, and then it goes deeper. I think if you have that accountability, that's an interesting. I'm not.
Yeah. So this is a unique problem I find in the church where they'll have men's groups that are catered to having intimate conversations with other men within the congregation. I find that to be healthy. I just find that it's not the same as friendship. So like, it goes for a period of time, it can go for a long period of time. But I've had people that just call you, how you doing? Kind of like a sponsor,
they're
like
ministers.
They're
a ministry.
But I don't feel like they're friends, right? And then there are friends I can do that with, where I can confess things to them.
The illustration's really good, yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to say that because it's unique when you come to a church where I have been places where everybody shares their deepest, darkest problems, and you're just like, wow, that's a lot of intimacy. But then you don't want to hang out with anybody or do anything or be friends. So I kind of need both of those for a true relationship to happen. And I would say there's probably only like 3 or 4 people that I would consider capable of doing both of those things. And I just find churches are unique, or if you're in an AA group, I wasn't, but like I come from the psych background, there are a lot of intimate things that you can have conversations on that I've learned have nothing to do with relationships. So like when you're into supervision in psychology and you're doing all these things, you're sharing your own intimate things with the person who's just your boss. And it has nothing to do with it. And it's mostly related to work, but there are things like, I didn't like that person because he triggered and so I've just come from this weird background where if you're counseling a lot or ministering a lot, you end up hearing a lot of intimate things, but that's different from a friendship to me. And so some people, that's the fear of people who are oversharers. If you overshare with everybody and you don't have any camaraderie with them, and you're assuming that because you shared, you're connected, and that doesn't always connect you. There has to be something other than just you spilling your beans, but also you're loyal and you actually want to hang out with that person and love them, and there's a mutual connection in that regard, so that they can share with you things and you can respond appropriately.
We'll get really
just because you share doesn't mean that you're close friends, because sometimes that can push you away.
Remember,
because they're like,
to be somebody,
oh my gosh, you overwhelm me.
There's a loyalty factor to true friendship, in my opinion, and you find that out oftentimes in crisis when you actually need someone, whether they're there or they're there because of proximity or something else.
What about you, Brent?
I would say 3 people probably in my life on a consistent basis, 4 people in my life that not, another person, meaning 4, that it's not as consistent with. But I would say 3 people probably are the most consistent with in that. Now, again, when it comes down to it, obviously you can't share all your dirty laundry with everybody. So how many different, this isn't comprehensive, but, how many different levels of friendship do you think that are common to most people, and then what level of transparency should you be, and intimacy should you be with each level?
So I think that this is kind of weird, but like there is the acquaintance level, and you can have upwards, I think it's 150 people you're capable of really having an acquaintance.
Usually it's like
with.
75, I find.
Yeah, it depends on if you're an extrovert or an introvert, because I think extroverts have a broader suite. They can do almost 200, and like introverts can be as down to like 70 or something like that.
So what would you define as an acquaintance? Somebody you just
see on a regular basis.
Here on Sundays, you have conversations with people, Or would acquaintance be people that you would maybe even go out to dinner with?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
By the time you're going out to dinner, you're trying to move someone from acquaintance into like that,
or getting to know them.
Getting to know them. Dinners and stuff are not going to define what level you're at. That's going to define whether or not what you're doing to move people in and around. I would say that acquaintances are people you see on a semi-regular basis that you would know by name, but beyond a few incidental details, maybe how many kids they've got, even if it's not, you just know their face, that's an acquaintance.
They would know I'm a Steelers fan.
Right.
I wear Steelers gear.
Oftentimes we tell people a lot about ourselves by the way we dress and what we talk about, right? So there's a lot of people I'm acquainted to here at the church, and then there's strangers that I minister to. Like I even think that we have to separate out ministry. Like there's a lot more people you can do ministry to that are not like they're family, but they're not even in that acquaintance area. An acquaintance is really somebody that I would say I know them. Hey, I've had a connection with, and I see them on a pretty semi-regular basis. Then there's the next group, which is a level of between. They say it's between 12 to 25 or something like that. And that is this group of like the teammate, or we were calling it teammate, the buddies. Now you're really, these are your companions. These are the people that you doing stuff with. They can be
playing
coworkers.
Fantasy football with,
right?
No,
I'm not gonna let fantasy football fly, because technically, this is people you're seeing in physicality, arm in arm. Like, if you're doing that and you're all gathering together for your fantasy football to talk about it, that's one thing. But if you're just, because so many people just don't even know who the other people are, and it could be like my brother-in-law's friend who's on this fantasy football league, that's different. I would say that you would be watching football together. You would be like both talking about it, and it's a real. This is honestly where most people are lonely, is that they have not solidified the time in which they are meeting with their buddies or their companions. A lot of people will have that moment where they're calling that deep friend, where they're connecting with that deep friend, but they don't go hang out with them. If they love plays, they don't go see a play together. If they love playing games, they don't do the games. If they like football, they don't watch football together. They isolate themselves during football games. Or, it's like, no, we've lost these communal moments that are supposed to be about that smaller group of guys or gals who like the same thing, and they're like, oh dude, that's a solar eclipse, let's all get in the van and go chase it, or hey, we really enjoy chess and we're all gonna notice how big of a nerd I am. I'm still struggling out there to find.
I saw the side eye when you said they isolate themselves to watch the football games. I saw that.
Yeah, you used to not do that. You used to have a couple of friends that came over, your buddies, that you would watch it together with, and because you like.
I do not mind watching football with people. It's just the Super Bowl. If this, Super Bowl,
I don't want to be communal moment in all of American
I don't
life.
want to be in a big crowd where everybody's talking.
It's like
and
saying,
you don't
I just want to be alone on Christmas.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of like this is the danger for women is that they turn their children into this group. But it's not the right connection. It's not the same kind of thing as having a group of friends that you're connecting with and doing something you enjoy and you love. They both see identically. You love talking about that book. You love talking about politics. And we're going to go see the debate together and laugh and like scream at the TV or whatever. This is really the part I think why we're not seeing people rebuild that deepest relationship of friends anymore. Is because they don't have this section in particular. I mean, that's 12 upwards to 24, in some cases for extroverts, even more, of people that you can hang out with. And yeah, that could be some coworkers, but it depends on what kind of company you're in. Like, we're pretty connected here. It's only 15 of us on staff. And I mean, if even that anymore, it's like, we don't even see each other all the time. So are we all buddies? I wouldn't know if we would say that. And so there's a reality that level is what I think most people are missing. And then there's that intimate, and I think introverts can have up to 7, and I think extroverts can have up to 4. I think it inverses, because introverts crave and get power from very close relationships, and extroverts, I think, get exhausted with very up close relationships. They're really good with like lots of little like I love all these different people, but you can't. But introverts will lock onto one person and go deep, and I think they can handle a few more actually in that deeper zone. I mean, I don't have any evidence for that. It's my intuition. Stephen be like, nope, that's not true. Extroverts can have plenty more, whatever, or we're just all equal at the intimate level. But everything I've read is anything from like 3 upwards of 7, and 7's pushing it.
Most people are also ambiverts, which means that there are certain scenarios or situations where you are more extroverted than you are introverted. So if you take a bunch of nerds and you put them at Comic-Con, they're going to look like extroverts because of the scenario. So you have to know what you're drawn to in affiliation. So that helps with it. But yeah, typically people do get exhausted with more people.
So how many best friends do you think you can have?
I don't think there's a limitation. I think typically life limits
now
it.
I would just threw that out just to test your math skills. Okay, one best, right? Best means the best. You can't have
you can have a group
8 best friends.
So if the Steelers win, they're not all the best.
Yeah, are you using best? You're equivocating on the word best.
I'm just saying.
Best could be categorically
categorical or individual.
I don't know.
Or individually, this is my best friend individually.
I don't know.
I argue for a category. Don't have a best friend. Have best friends. Keep a category of best.
If you add the S to it, then then it works. But to say they're my best friend and they're my best friend and they're my best friend, I think mathematically that cannot work.
I mean, the language is like just as weird as they're my best friend and I'm talking about you.
And if they're your BFF, that just means that you're 12 or younger, right? So
maybe, or just a girl. I don't know if guys go, I have BFF.
I have 28 BFFs, and then you hear that voice going, I don't think that means what you think it means.
Keep using that word. I don't think that means what you think it means.
So again, one of the things you were talking about in the sermon was friendship is not exclusive, but transparency, intimacy, things like that. Would you say that is pretty semi-exclusive? Meaning that you're not going to share it with everybody.
Is semi-exclusive, like
to say that friendship is not exclusive. So
what we mean by that is that you should not. Exclusivity in that definition is only one other person.
Like in marriage.
Like in a marriage is exclusive. You can't have a semi-exclusive marriage. That would be bad.
Right? You can't be semi-faithful.
Right. That's so when I'm using the word exclusive, I'm meaning like in a marriage, one to one person. That would be not healthy in
it doesn't mean
friendship.
Your friendships include and exclude different people. I mean, some people are your friends and some people aren't. So in that sense, exclusive. That's not the way he's using it.
Yeah, right. No, I'm using it as like, it's only me. And so there are some people out there they would say, well, I'm just a one friend at a time person. And I would say you need counseling because you got to be able to have several people who know you well. But what they're really saying is I just only like what this person's making me feel right now and I don't have time for everybody else. That's a usury. That's not a friendship. And that's akin to a codependent concept, and you got to be careful with that kind of stuff.
But I can also see people. There are people who come to stages in their life where they say, "I don't need any more friends. I've got all the friends I have," and that may be true for how you feel, But I would caution people who feel that way that God might not be happy with that scenario.
Yes,
because there needs to be a little discomfort into your relationships in order to grow. And if everybody starts to think groupthink is a real problem, and what helps groupthink is having someone that needs more grace to test your boundaries and test your level of friendship. And if you don't have that in your life, then I kind of worry about the value of the group itself that you've attached your friendships to. And it could be very exclusive. Also, that is, I think, the reason why there's a loneliness epidemic. I do think people internalize their base relationships and excluded everyone else. And that's become an epidemic in the church. I do believe there's an idolization of marriage. So marriage is the primary intimacy and there's no other kind or another form that's desired or modeled. And that's what's dropped off. And so the churches who've done well have modeled just what it looks like to be in good relationships. and really trust that. So I was like a Redeemer Presbyterian was like mostly single people going to that church, and they were connected and they were growing, and they were connected to married people and married people to single people. But I do feel like if you putting all your eggs in the expectations of finding a mate, and then that's going to fix all your intimacy problems, you're going to have a really bad marriage. And you're also going to not have a network to help you navigate through that marriage. I've helped a lot of men after they got married to stay married, because they needed an outside opinion on how to love somebody because they didn't have the skill. And if you exclude just those two people, where are you going to learn it? You're either going to learn, if your spouse can't give it to you and you can't get it from anyone else outside, you're stuck. And so that's why relationships, even exclusive marriage relationships, need to be open to other friendships. So.
All right. You ready to go to the question?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So
We're
Now
going to be
we're
talking
to
about this for quite a
Christian.
few weeks, so we're going to have plenty of stuff to talk about.
So, this is a question, Keith, that we didn't get to last week. So we'll throw it out there today. So thank you, Keith, for sending in your question to Rabbit Trail at obcc.church. And so he starts out and says, "Hey, hello, the pastors trio. This is Keith. I have a kind of two-part question about something that's been..."
Was that a vote for a new name?
Oh, pastors trio. Oh.
Now we're the PT. Oh, wait, what does PT do?
Physical therapy
Okay.
or physical training.
Pastors trio. Trio.
Okay.
What
We
is
have a
that?
new theme song
What
now.
is that old Jamaican song?
It's Deo.
Deo, yeah.
Beetlejuice. He's just pulling it up.
Yeah.
He's current and he doesn't
The
even know
morning
it.
coming.
You wonder why we chase
wanna
rabbit
go
trails.
home or something. I was
right,
trying to
go.
think of the words.
Keep going, sorry.
Okay, hello to Pastors Trio. This is Keith. I have
Hi,
kind of a
Keith.
two-part question about something that's been on my mind since my son Jason died in the car accident 7 years ago. What age will we be in heaven? The reason I ask is because prior to Jason being born, my ex-wife had a miscarriage and an ectopic pregnancy, 3 and 6 weeks into the pregnancy. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb." So does that mean he will have brothers and sisters in heaven? And that's where my question of age comes from, because I believe life begins at conception. What age will they be? I enjoy listening to the podcasts. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to first just start off and say there's some interesting resources out there that you can take a look at to get some more detailed answers than what we're going to give you. One of those that I like to point people to is a book called Heaven by Randy Alcorn, and he's going to give you a perspective that deals a lot with the resurrection, and even since he's a premillennialist, he believes in the millennial reign. And so his argument would be that babies that have died in abortions, since he's a very strong pro-life advocate, his argument is that they will be reconstituted in the resurrection as children to be raised by those in the millennium. And therefore, some of them will be babies, some of the children who are going to grow up to a particular age. And he argues that because there are texts in the Old Testament promises that indicate that we're going to look at a child, and we're going to look at somebody who's been 100 years old and say, you're still a child. So that would imply that there have been people who've been growing up, in this kind of new Edenic reality. And then once that's over in the eternal age, there will be no more children given in marriage and things like that. And so there will just be this translation into that reality. So there's a lot
to
of...
me would almost sound like, you're 100 years old and you're just a child, meaning eternity is so long, you haven't even, scratched the surface of your age.
Yeah, and I think that's in general what it's getting at, but he does make that interesting application in the sense of a millennial reign. Now, strangely, there's been a lot of conversation about this question in theology, and many, I believe there's a lot of old church fathers and some who have argued that the age that generally will all be is somewhere in that zone that Jesus died at, like that 30, 33, kind of when that you've hit that maturity. Many people there's a point at which your body actually starts to die, and it's somewhere in that 25, 35 range, somewhere in there, and then you just start slowly deteriorating over the next so many odd years. And a lot of people feel like genetically you're going to be at that genetic your body will get to that genetically perfect state at which you'll remain. It will not age any further. You won't have, the cell death will be equivalent to the cell life. There won't have cancers and disease and these other things that are causing problems. So you will look and be, in the resurrected sense, 30 something years old for the rest of your life, like in your peak ability, peak health. So that's, but what will you look like now when you get there in heaven? There's, so, I mean, at that point, the answer is, I don't know. We can enter into some speculative theology. Like, there are people who have near-death experiences and experienced meeting siblings that they didn't know they had in eternity, like, and it being confirmed. Like, there's some of this kind of stuff that's been out there, and they always meet a young child. They don't meet an adult. And so that's interesting. I believe that doesn't weigh any evidence because it's not biblical. And there's no evidence biblically of any of that kind of a thing going on in the text. But when we're doing speculative theology, you can take other inputs and go, well, this is interesting. And it doesn't break anything within the scriptures either, because Jesus is one who says, bring the children to me, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So there is a sense of this Jesus who is attractive to children, that children enjoyed being with him. Children have a natural faith that seems to be there when you tell them about God. They kind of like, yeah, duh. And it's older, you kind of lose that. But so that's some of my thoughts, that it comes to an embryo would probably be a child, some child to be raised, or some child that is a child in the presence of God who is, I mean, what's the difference? We're going to be children in adult bodies. A child in a child's body, we just don't realize how childish we are because we mask it so much with pride, and we mask so much with these social expectations on what an adult is. Like, I think we can be mature, but I think there should be a childishness. In fact, if you want an interesting approach on this, read Tolkien. J.R.R. Tolkien's elves are supposed to be a picture of an eternal being. So in The Hobbit, they're laughing and singing and doing silly songs. They're very childlike.
Dwarves or elves?
Elves.
In Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the elves are happy and building toys.
I want to be a dentist.
Yeah.
So anyway, but what he was trying to do in The Hobbit is draw out what they're like in a peaceful time. They acted like children, singing songs and having merry and enjoying meals. But you looked at them and they looked young, but they had an ancientness to them. So that was that idea, that resurrection. It's in the, you don't look at the Fellowship of the Rings and stuff, because they've now entered into their like leaving off to their eternal lands, and they're a little more depressed and like dour. But even there, they have a tendency to sing some silly songs and different kinds of things. So it's kind of interesting. He was attempting, I believe, to give us an image of an eternal like kind of being. So another illustration from speculative fiction. So
yeah, a lot of speculation.
Anything you want to add to that, you guys?
No, I just looked up different theories. Some of them, they're kind of most of what you said. There's one that's called age reflexive or spiritual maturity, which is like you'll look the age that you're spiritually mature at until you get to a matured state. I don't know what that looks like.
So I'm 5.
Well, you could be, yeah, and then you have to grow.
My jokes?
Some people think people will be the age that they died at, but no one will really care, but it'll be a perfected form of that age. So I don't know what that looks like.
With hair,
maybe.
Yes.
When you were,
everyone will be the same age.
What age were you when you lost your hair?
I don't know, but it was far too young. So
you better figure it out, because
I know. I think when my kids were really small, so. I was born in 1962. Lissy was born in 1985, so I was 23, right? Am I right? So I would say by my late 20s, my hair was thin.
I do think, however, eternity will look something like the 80s, because that seems to be the
age everybody likes.
Everybody wants to stay in, and I'm just kidding.
Yes.
I'm totally joking. So.
Yeah, and I really don't have a strong opinion on this. I just the only thing I feel confident in it. I think that we will know who people are in heaven. So whatever they look like.
Especially if you shake their hand and say, "Hi, my name is so and so."
Yeah, but we don't have to wear name tags. I think we're going to have an understanding.
Thank the Lord.
and a knowledge of one another. So
I guess, like, according to this Thomas Aquinas was the first one to suggest that we will be around 30 to 33 because that's the mature age at which Jesus reached full development. And then, so he suggests that because of 1 John 3:2, we'll be like Christ after the resurrection.
We'll see him, we'll be like him.
Yeah, so that's where that came from. But I thought that was interesting. But it is speculative theology, so it is fun.
I mean, how old did Moses look and Elijah look when they were on the mountain? That'd be interesting. Did they look like old men on the mountain, or did they look like young men on the mountain?
And how did the disciples know without Jesus telling them?
Knew it was him. He's like, I'm Moses. I'm holding the
10 Commandments.
15. 10 Commandments.
all right. For that, you could take us out.
All right. Well, anyway, we're glad you guys joined us. We hope you stuck it out with us all the way through to the end, as we're just three friends trying to figure out how to help everybody else have some friends. But we're glad that you were with us. And if you have any questions, comments, or otherwise, we would love to hear from you. And please send your jokes, your comments, your questions to rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. And we will see you guys next week. God bless.
Boom chakalaka.
Bye.